Welcome back to Fathers for Fathers at the Fathers for Fathers podcast. We got such a treat for you today. We're going to have a candid conversation. It's no holds barred. We're letting it all hang out today. We're talking to Spenser Mason. Fathers for Fathers, if you don't know, we offer hope to men at various stages in the journey. You might be married. You might not be married anymore. You might be on your second marriage. We just want to be here for men. We offer hope. We want to influence culture, and we want to support men at different parts in their journey. I just want to pass it over to my co-founder and co-host for this show, Jonathan Lewis.
Hey, thanks, Jeff. Yeah, I'm really excited about talking to Spenser today, guys. I mean, I would even add to that, you might be in prison and you might be a recovering addict. You could be any number of things. This organization, this ministry is for you. We want to breathe life into men. And if you're one of the guys that's listening to us, I'm really excited for today. I've had the privilege of knowing Spenser for over a decade. He's an amazing guy who has an amazing journey that he's going to share with us. We're going to start with that. And then obviously we'll get into a Q&A session. I hope we ask the questions you want us to ask. But if we don't, you can message us and I'll go to Spenser and get the answer and send it to you. So Spenser, welcome. So glad to have you here, brother.
Wonderful. Thank you guys so much for having me on. Really excited.
So Spenser said, what are we going to talk about? And normally Jeff, behind the scenes, being an executive producer with a lot of experience, he's got like all these questions and he's researched people and he sends me like YouTube videos of them, and I've got to prepare and get versed, and then we dive in and we go at it. And today's a little bit unorthodox. We literally just prayed offline and just said, hey, let's just see where the Lord leads us. So Spenser, I'd like to start with you just sharing your testimony and a little bit of your story, because I think it's really important for you to be able to speak to authority with the guys that are listening, for them to know where you came from. And so I'm just going to give you the floor, and you can just tell us, who's Spenser Mason and how did he start this journey to end up being a young adult pastor now in his 30s. You didn't start out there. So let's start with where you did start.
Yeah, well, just as a great preface to my story, just to acknowledge the fact that I am a pastor now. And I say this to people all the time. I was actually at a wedding from some friends from high school this summer, and a lot of them I hadn't seen since high school. And, there's the obvious question of, oh, what do you do now? And I would say I'm a pastor. And I had people look at me like a deer in headlights. They couldn't believe it. So if I had known back in high school, in my younger days, that I would become a pastor, I would have thought absolutely not, that it would be just the craziest thing ever. So I did not grow up in the church. I did not grow up really knowing anything about God at all. And I will say this, in regards to my family life growing up, my parents were extremely loving to me. They were very, very supportive. And I like to always preface with that, just to get the understanding, because at the end of the day, families are messy. And there were a lot of things that happened throughout my life when I was younger that, contributed to some of the bad choices that I made. But in the midst of the messiness of the family, there was a foundational love that was there. And my parents really did want to give me every opportunity possible to succeed. But there was just, in the midst of that, there was just mess. And so I really was, supported by them growing up. I, in a lot of ways, as a young kid, was kind of labeled as this guy that was full of potential, was going to do, lots of great things and so on. I was very involved in sports and did half decent in school. Really had a bright future ahead of me, so it seemed on the outside. And as I've kind of processed my testimony over the years, it's interesting how things have sort of been revealed to me about my past and about my upbringing, and really things that have played into some of the decisions that I had made that weren't good. And I've kind of come to this conclusion that insecurity as a young person was a major root in the poor decisions that I ended up making along the way.
Mm.
And I was kind of spoken over in a lot of ways of, you elevated onto a bit of a pedestal because of sports and these things. And I had a lot of pressure on me from family. And it's interesting because in these circumstances, like when you kind of find your identity in how well you do in whatever the case is, whether it be sport, school, or whatever, when you get your identity and your worth from what you produce and what you do, that can oftentimes bring one of two things. One, it either pushes you, to work harder and to just strive and do whatever it takes, to move forward, or it'll cause fear and it'll cause you to do the opposite and then not want to do anything at all. And so that's really what happened with me. I just grew this immense insecurity and this fear of failure, because if I didn't measure up, then my worth and my identity would fall apart.
Wow.
And so as I went, and again, this is kind of revelation that has come to me over the years, but that was really foundational. And my father, because I had grown up in a home where there was dysfunction, where there was addiction and alcoholism, and this is something, when I look back through my family, it's intertwined generationally in my family. And so as a young person, I'm dealing with these insecurities, I'm dealing with these pressures, I'm dealing with these fears, and I'm seeing ways, I guess you could say, to cope with these things, ways that aren't healthy in relation to addiction. And so as kind of the years progressed from there, still as a young kid, my parents separated when I was 12, and I watched the destruction of a house falling apart. And again, I state this, that, my father was and is a wonderful man, and taught me so much. But because of the things that he dealt with, I was exposed to a lot of disappointment, a lot of things that, just kids shouldn't be. And as a result, that just ingrained a lot of things within me. So at that age of 12, when my parents separated, that's when things really went bad for me. And I know you're thinking, when you're 12 years old, how, what could really be that bad? But this was the age that I started to explore alcohol and drugs, such an early age. Everything that I did, I just went in full force, even at that young age. And so I quickly realized that the insecurities, the fear, the pain of, the dysfunction of my family, and all of these things, momentarily and temporarily became better when I used these substances. And so now, instead of me finding my value and my worth in what I could do, I now found fake value in using substances to just make myself feel better. And so we know the stories when, you go full in on these things at a young age, there's only one direction that it can go, and that's worse and worse and worse. And so by the time, I was in high school, it was a full-blown cocaine addiction, alcohol, everything else, everything that you can imagine. And again, at such a young age, and I just went in full force with all of that. And now all of the potential that had been spoken over me as a young kid, all of it was completely gone. And all of the dreams that I had, all of the aspirations that I had, all of them were completely gone. And in a weird sense, it actually took a lot of pressure off of me. And
Right.
so again, momentarily, I felt free in a sense, because now I didn't have to live up to this ideal that I thought I had to live up to. Now that obviously is a temporary feeling, and very quickly you begin to realize that this is just such an empty life. There's nothing of value in this. You're chasing after things that last for a short time and then go away, and you end up in more destruction. And these are just the patterns that I had witnessed, even within my family growing up. And so every time I tried to make one step forward in life, I would take 3 steps back. I tried to go to community college. That very quickly didn't work. I spent all of my tuition money on drugs in a matter of a week, and I dropped out, tried to go get a job, was fired from my job because of having a criminal record. And all of these things just sort of came to a head. And now, one thing that I feel very fortunate about is that I kind of came to this rock bottom place at a relatively young age. And I was able to recognize that and move forward. But it's also interesting in relation to my father. When I was 12 years old, when my parents separated, that's really when things got really bad. So my mom and I and my sister, we moved out. And at that point in time, my father wasn't in my life at all. He had met somebody else. They moved out and he was doing his thing. And so in these, crucial years from 12 to about 16, he wasn't in my life at all. And that's the season of life that things got really, really bad for me. Now, when I was 16, I actually moved back in with my father because my mom could not handle me anymore. And it was just a really bad scene. And so my dad at that point said, okay, I'll take him with me. Now, my father was still dealing with his alcoholism. And so the addiction that I had, I could just do under his care, essentially. But with that to be said, even though my dad had his own issues there, and my addiction got worse, there was actually improvements during that time of moving in with my dad. And I think it was just because, although, there was still a lot of dysfunction, I still had that foundation of being in relationship with my father. And so, some of the crime that I had been involved in, some of the just stupid teenager stuff that I was getting involved in, some of that actually subsided when I moved in with my dad, because I even though it wasn't a perfect relationship, he was still there at that point in my life. And so again, fast forward to, after I had gone through these things of losing my job and dropping out of school, I land myself in a place called Teen Challenge, which, Jonathan, that's where you and I had first met. Yeah. And Teen Challenge, it's a long-term drug and alcohol treatment center, Christ-centered program. I had no Christian background.
Let me pause you there really quickly, because that's a lot for people to process. And a couple of things, that come to mind is, what were your social circles like? How were you getting into these petty crimes and things? Obviously it was to pay for your drugs. Just walk us through like where your head was at the time. I know your story really well from the time you arrived at Teen Challenge, and you've shared that with me. But I know that there's kids that I'm mentoring, that are in high school right now. Their parents are coming to me saying, "Jonathan, can you talk to our son?" Because if you're involved with Teen Challenge, word gets out, and it's like somehow somebody can save him. Surely Jonathan can, if he's on the board for Teen Challenge Canada. But like, walk me through grade 10 to grade 12, and where was Spenser at in his thought process, his social circle? Was there any moments of light where you're like, oh man, like that's where I need to be, and I know it, but I'm not there. I'm over here. Like,
yeah. And the fact that you mentioned social stuff, like a lot of what I got into at that age was as a result of trying to hang around with older people who, had already been experimenting with these things. And quite honestly, I think it was just the desire to look to older male figures. Right. Even though they weren't extremely older than me, there was still just that desire, an older guy that I would look up to, and he's doing this, and I want to be accepted. And so I'm going to do whatever it is to gain their acceptance.
So the wrong mentors.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's an aha moment for me, Spenser. Even sorry to cut in, just so much of what you're saying is exactly my story too. Like you have like we choose, we often choose the wrong mentors. And when I was young, and I was, it's funny, around the same age as when I went off the rails was around 12. And
Yeah.
is when that was when my dad officially left the home. But I was constantly in search of these older guys, and I wouldn't know. I had a bad example. Bless my dad's heart, but he was a great example of what a good mentor was. So I would go to all these different places, different guys who are older than me, who I thought, yeah, that's gonna be my daddy figure, or my older brother, or my uncle, or my cousin,
Mm,
who's gonna steer me right. But
mm,
it's but when you don't have a base, and you don't know what the attributes or characteristics of a great mentor is, you take anything, or
yeah.
what looks cool and what looks shiny or what looks fun, So, anyways,
Yeah.
resonates with me a lot what you're saying just now.
Yeah. And I think even, even outside of kind of the people that are directly in your life, I mean, culture, you think about the cues that young people take from culture and what they see as a man that, you should aspire to. And so when you're young, you're inundated with all of this stuff from what culture is telling you. And, you're searching for this affirmation from men to pour into your life, and you'll do whatever it takes to gain that acceptance or whatever. And so and that's, I think, a lot of the reason why when you talk about addiction, people come from all kinds of different family backgrounds who end up in
Yeah.
addiction. Like no
Yeah.
one is safe from it in that sense. Like,
Sure.
and I say this to parents all the time who say, where did I go wrong, and how is my child in this state? And the reality is that it's not their fault. It's that they are looking to other people and other things, and they're seeing things at school or wherever the case is, and they're going to gravitate towards these influences, and they're going to want to gain the affirmation from that. And so that's why who you spend your time with, and as parents, who you allow your kids to spend time with, is so
Yeah.
crucial. Because again,
Yeah.
you could have raised them and given them every opportunity, but all of a sudden, they start looking up to people for whatever reason, who are going to lead them down the wrong track. As a parent, I mean, you're limited with how you can intervene in those situations. So,
And alcohol, drugs are addictive. Like I
yeah,
find it remarkable, even talking to adults that don't seem to understand. Like alcohol is an extremely addictive substance, right? Like if you drink enough of it, it doesn't matter who you are, you will be addicted. It's what it does. So I find that remarkable. Like Sarah years ago, Spencer, I think you know this, but we gave up drinking 4 or 5 years ago now. And I won't even get into how that set us free in so many ways. I know the church, it's such a contentious thing. Paul said to Timothy, here's the thing. It's an addictive substance. You could run your car with it if we didn't dilute it. And I can't even think of one good thing that comes from it. But I can tell you a whole lot of bad things that come from it. And so for us, it was a pretty easy decision. And, we obviously we have lots of brothers and sisters who are Christians that, drink, and, we don't pass any judgment. We're good at mocktails and non-alcoholic beer. And I still love the taste of the hops. I mean, I drank, right? I was in the Canadian Army. You don't go through the Canadian Army and not learn how to drink. But yeah, I find it remarkable that people are even naive to the fact that although this is culturally accepted and alcohol is like a guest of honor at every major event, it is actually an addictive substance that will destroy you if you're not careful. So for Sarah and I as young Christians, we were all these like, why do all these Christians want to see how close they can get to the fire without getting burnt? It's like a game for them. I'm like, I've already been burnt by the fire. I don't want to ever go anywhere near it again, right? And I'm sure that
yeah.
resonates with you. So let's hand it back to you. You're in high school. You're like thankful that you were young enough to identify like this isn't good, and then teen challenge.
Yeah. A whole new world opened up to me at this point. I had no, like, when it came to church, when it came to faith, when it came to God, I knew nothing. Now, as I looked back, I saw, through the years, some very significant things that I could recognize looking back, saying, the Lord was there, and he was faithful, and he was good in the midst. I actually remember this one night, and I couldn't tell you when it was exactly, but it was in the thick of my addiction, and I had been up for a couple days straight using.
Wow.
And again, and keep in mind, I have no reference point for God really at all. Like, I had done the Christmas and Easter thing like a little bit, but nothing.
Right.
And one night, it was probably 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning after being up for a couple of days straight, I just started to weep. Like, I had this moment of reflection over my life of like, how in the world did I get here? And I just began to weep, and I cried out to Jesus. Like, I don't know the exact words that I said or how, but it was like something in me that just came because I was desperate, and I didn't know what else to do. And that just came out of me. And I know whenever that night was, there was something that changed. And so that's why I say, though I go into Teen Challenge, I know nothing prior to that. I know that there was things that God was doing in my life to prepare me for what was to come. And so I go in, and I'm broken at this point. I remember the first day that I woke up. It was in January.
How old were you? How old were you at this point?
I was 19.
Okay.
And so the first day that I woke up, it was in January. And so when we woke up, it was still pitch dark out.
Yeah.
And I was on the top bunk in my dorm room, and I opened my eyes, and it's dark around. And I just had this weight in this moment where like everything in my life up to this point just came crashing down upon me, where I realized I am now in drug rehab for a full year. And this is where life has brought me. This is where I'm at. But with that to be said, right from the very start, there was just something in me, like I said, that I just knew that there was something real here. I knew that this Jesus and so on, like that there was something tangible that was drawing me in. And so it didn't take me long when I went into the program to be like, yes, I don't understand it, but I surrender my life. And it wasn't this, I just want to stop doing drugs.
Right.
It wasn't that, because that never works.
Yeah.
And you fill in the blank with anything. When we just say, I just don't want to do this thing, but I want to just live life in every other way on my own, my own thoughts, like it just doesn't work. So I was at this place where I said, I give it all. And it was just a full surrender. And so the Lord just totally, he set me free, honestly, like not from everything. There was still a sanctification process, and there's still a sanctification process, of course, that's still playing out in my life.
You mean you didn't come out of the box pre-sanctified with a bow? I thought
No.
that was a prerequisite at a Pentecostal church. That's
No,
awesome,
right.
bro.
Church, you're always
That's
trying to
awesome.
earn your salvation, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, Spencer, I got another question for you. So, I mean, you've probably heard this saying before, and I bet you it comes up. It could have come up at Teen Challenge, but people sometimes talk about the God spot inside of them. That it's an emptiness that is that we're all looking to fill in some way, and we fill it with the dopamine hit we get from business, the dopamine hit we get from alcohol, action. For me, I'm an action Jackson junkie kind of thing. I love, and I've been, anyways, that's another story, but yeah, it's all a God spot that we're looking to fill. And it's something that only God can come in and fill us up and sanctify us and change us from the inside out. I'm wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about that God spot. If you have a reference point for that, if you talked about it.
It sounds like that's where you were in this moment, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't know what it was. I couldn't put my finger on it. I certainly couldn't put language to it. I was trying to deal with what is this Christianese that these guys are talking about? But despite all of that, there was just a total recognition. And I remember the day, and I remember the day that I fully surrendered to Christ. It was really the first time I had actually heard the gospel, like the gospel actually laid out to me. And as soon as I heard it, I said, yes, this is what I've been waiting for. And I'm in. And I remember, I'll never forget this day. I was in my dorm in Teen Challenge, and it was right after we had got back from a Sunday church. And a guy who was in the program had laid the gospel out to me, and I said, yes, this is what I've wanted.
Okay, so two things. You've never been to church, and now you're going to church with a bunch of guys who are all in this 1-year program. But like, let's not even assume, like, so you say this guy laid out the gospel. What is the gospel, right? That this guy laid out to you. What does that mean? Because like, it's crazy how we can start speaking churchanese, but for you, this was like a brand new thing. And he's telling you what? What is he telling you?
So in his explanation to me, it was based off this little pamphlet, this simple little pamphlet that he had got actually from church. And so in my mind, the conversation started off like this. He said, if you died today, would you go to heaven? And I was like, whoa. I was like, I think so. I'm a good person. Like, I try to do things right. Yeah, I'm saying this and I'm in rehab, which is funny. But I kind of, gave that answer to him. And he just explained to me, sorry, first I said, I think I would. And he said, the fact that you're not sure tells me that you wouldn't. So that was how he started the conversation with me. So it's a pretty intense moment. And then he began to just lay out. And again, I don't fully know what details he went into. He was a relatively new Christian himself, so I don't know how much foundation he had. But he was going off just the idea that sin separates us from God, and that we don't have the ability in our own strength or in anything of us to be able to bridge the gap between us and God, where sin is placed in the center. So it was a little diagram that showed, a cliff here and a cliff here, sin in the middle, us here and God here, right? Just this little thing. And so he just explained this separation between us and God, and that Jesus coming and dying on the cross, taking our sin upon him, that is bridging the gap, that through Christ, through the cross, through faith in him, through repentance, that we can then be reconciled back to God. And so again, it was along those lines based on that. And so it was the first time I had ever heard that, because my understanding up to that point was just do better, do good. And if your good deeds outweigh your bad deeds, then maybe you'll make it to heaven. That was my understanding. And so this was revolutionary for me, because I knew.
So this guy says to you, hey, you're not a good person. None of us are. You got an issue, and it's called sin, and you can't fix it. This guy, Jesus, this gospel of Jesus, this guy came down, God in the flesh, basically bore your sin to the point of dying on a cross so that your sins were remediated or taken care of or paid for, so that you could actually have a bridge over those two cliffs to God, where you are forgiven and literally you have sonship. Like for the men listening to this whole thing of, I needed this mentor, I was trying to please, I was trying to earn, I was trying to be part of the crowd. That's no longer an issue, because you are given this free gift of sonship, because your brother Christ, Jesus, went and said, hey, I'll take this for you, man. I'll take this for you. And so you heard this for the first time. This guy's sharing this with you.
And again, because like I had said, my whole identity was whether I do a good job at things or not, whether I succeed or not. And so, like, this being said, that it's not about earning, that it's about Christ, Like it blew my mind. And so I said, yes, absolutely. Like, I don't know what I did. I don't know what I prayed, but all I know is that in me in that moment, it was all for him. And we left the dorm and we walked down to lunch. And I just like, I was like that Second Corinthians 5:17 moment, like that walk out the hallway down the stairs was that like new creation. Second Corinthians 5:17, the old has gone, the new has come. It's just, it was absolutely, it was incredible. And so, in many ways, from that moment on, I never looked back. That doesn't mean that it wasn't a hard journey. I mean, I walked out a whole year in rehab from that point. You know, removed from my family, removed from the world, essentially. But it was the most forming and transformational life of my year of my life, year of my life. So, you know, I don't regret it for a second.
Yeah, and so you were, if I'm not mistaken, at the Men's Center in Eastern Canada. You were the first graduate of that center, correct? Is that, or one of the first?
One of the first, yeah, number 5.
Yeah, okay. And so, and it's hard to finish this program. I've been on the board for a lot of years. And I know the success rate we have, which is tremendous. It's better than anybody in the world, by the way. And it's not because we're trying to deal with the underlying issue, which is addiction. We're actually dealing with the root issue, which is sin, and that this person, you know, needs to truly be set free from that. And then it's a lot easier to deal with whatever it is that ails them, whether it's addiction to substance. Work was my addiction, Spenser. I mean, you and I talk, like, you know, I'm sure you pastor me and was like, is Jonathan striving or thriving? Right? Because it's not hard to tell when I'm striving. I'm sick, I'm not sleeping, and I'm working like a dog. And, you know, my wife says all the time, you have an unusual addiction in that other people, they get free of their addiction, they never go back to it, but you have to go every Monday morning and do it for 5 days. The trick is to stop at 5, which you know, I could work till 1 a.m. every day, 6 days a week, if you let me loose. So, so there's all kinds of addictions, but the point is you were set free, you finished this program, and it's not an easy program. So maybe speak to that, because there's a lot of guys listening to this. I want to be free. But it's tough.
Yeah.
It's tough. I've been in the Canadian Armed Forces, and I would liken it to boot camp. And then what?
Yeah. Well, I'll say, like, in relation to the program, honestly, what it did is it taught me to be a man.
Wow.
It really did.
Wow.
It taught me what, and you know, I talk to a lot of my young adults about this, like the young guys who are coming up and they're trying to figure out who they are and where life is going to take them, who they're going to marry, and all these things. And you know, I say to them, like, foundational things that you need to learn at this age is how to take responsibility, how to be disciplined,
own it,
how to be humble, how to live in a place of submission, you know, to authority. What routine looks like, even just the little practical things of what it means to be a functioning human in society. I mean, I had none of that. Like, that was a major reason that I stayed in a cycle of addiction, because I didn't know how to function as a man, as an adult, as a human being. And so there was so much value in that program that taught me those foundational things of what it means to be a man, what it means to take responsibility, to do the hard work, to humble yourself, to live a selfless life. Because, you know, when you're there, it's all selfless, in the sense of, like, you don't get any privileges. You basically hand over your rights, you know. So you live in that place for a whole year. So that was just, to me, that's what has formed me and brought me into a place of my faith, where I live that same thing out, where my faith is the most important thing to me. And so to act in a way where I'm just kind of willy-nilly about my walk with God, like, it just doesn't work that way.
Okay.
Right? Like,
so let's get into the meat of this now, because, you know, we'll lose the attention span of our listeners. And So you've gone through this formative period. I'm going to fast forward a little bit. So you end up graduating. You meet an amazing woman who understands God's grace, loves on you. Like, you even go through this period of unworthiness, like, really me. And now you're a leader of men. You're leading young men in their 20s and trying to help form their sense of, as you put it, responsibility and accountability and submission to authority. You talk about it's like central to your life. Like I say all the time, Lord of all are not Lord at all. Like it's remarkable to me when I meet people that are Christians, and then, you spend some time with them and it's like, okay, but is Jesus an accessory to your life? It's like, try Jesus on, or is he actually the center of your life? And it's not hard to tell the difference. And I think the real challenge here, and I want to hear this from you, Spenser, is what does it mean for him to be the Lord of your life, where you're like, no, I trust you. As Paul said, I'm a bondservant. I'm a slave to you, and quite willingly, because I trust you. Expand on that a little bit, because I've known you now for 10 years, and I have seen a very resolved and resolute follower of Christ. And we know your backstory now, but like, I have been discipled by you and impacted by you, because we basically became Christians roughly at the same time. It's just I was 34 and you were 20, but we've basically grown up as brothers in Christ for the last 13 or 14 years. Obviously with a degree of separation, but I'm always impressed. I really truly am at your resolved understanding of God's authority over your life. It's ministered to me, so I want that to come through for the guys listening.
Yeah. It's funny, actually, just this morning in some of my readings and prayer time, I really had this revelation that I know that I've always known. And I believe that this is the foundation of what you're asking me. And it really is what we need is, do you delight in the Lord? Do you delight in him? And what I mean by that is that if you're trying to be a good Christian, follow all the rules, break free from an addiction, or whatever the case is, if you're doing that from the standpoint of wanting to just do better or whatever, then it's not going to work that way, because
it's
your
works.
desires
you're getting trapped in works.
That's exactly it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And you can mask that with Christian language, but at the end of the day, if it's not as a result of an intimate delighting in God because of who he is and what he's done in you, if it's not from that standpoint, it is just as you said, it's works. But when there is a delight there and an actual vibrant and intimate relationship with Christ, that actually changes your desires.
Yeah.
So that you then can walk in a life of obedience to the word of God, because then you actually want to, and God is gracious, and again, without, I don't want to use too much Christian language here, but we have an understanding that in salvation, the Holy Spirit actually comes and lives within us. Like the living God dwells within us. Like that's an incredible truth.
Yeah.
And so that means we can have a life actually walking with him, like in interaction in the fullness. And so when we discover the delight of him, then our desires actually change, that we're willing to put the work in. We're willing to do the hard things. We're willing to be obedient because we see the beauty in it. We see the love in it. We see the abundance in it, that it's so much greater than any other thing that we could give ourselves to, right? And so for me, I really think that that's where it's come from. I certainly don't do this perfectly, but I try and have tried to make the focal point just that desire to delight in him, and
this
the
is good.
Overwhelming thanks.
This is good, bro. And Jeff, I'm sure you want to jump in here too, but it's the heart. What you're describing is the heart. Last week I was at a conference in Charleston, and we started off, talking about Cain and Abel. And here's these two guys. So for the guys that are listening, don't know the Bible, these are like basically practically the first two human beings ever, according to the Bible. There's basically Adam and Eve, and these are their two sons. And both of them had jobs. One was a farmer, one had cattle or sheep. They both brought a gift before the Lord, and the Lord loved one gift and didn't like the other.
Mm-hmm.
And the one was frustrated with, well, why is my gift no good? And it was the heart. One had a heart that said, as you're describing, Spenser, I want to walk with the Lord. I want to know my creator. I want to be friends with him. And he's inviting me to be friends with him. He's pursuing me. Like as you said, he sent Jesus to get you so that you can be brothers with Jesus. That's all he sees. He's giving you the Holy Spirit to live inside of you. And then you have this amazing ability to just walk daily with him and talk to him, which is like, it's hard not to get giddy when you've really experienced this. And I think a lot of Christians don't, like, they miss it. They hold back because they're like, well, I don't know if I can trust that God will actually be there. And what they're doing is they're actually holding back from someone who's like, no, you test me and see, like, I will be there. And this is about your heart. And David in the Bible, we always say he was a man after God's own heart, and yet he was an adulterer, a murderer, a liar, a thief. He did a lot of stupid stuff. But what did he have? He had a heart for God. Like he owned his sin. You talk about responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And, being an investment guy, I remember reading this parable. It's the shortest verse in the Bible. So if you're a guy and you've never read the Bible, go in, like, you can Google this, Matthew 13:44. And it's one sentence, one parable that Jesus told. And I struggled with this forever. And it says, again, the kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field, which a man found and hid. And then for joy over it, he was so excited, he goes and sells everything he has and buys that field. So in a material sense, like, I'm an investment guy, I'm like, all right, so sell everything I got and I buy this field, like in a physical sense, but it's a metaphor. And what Jesus was saying is, there is nothing you could possibly ever own, including your own pride or your lack of trust in me, that is worth more than having a relationship with me, like actually being in fellowship with me. And when you discover that, everything else pales, like nothing matters anymore. And someone can hurt you, they can spit on you, and what you see is what he sees, which is a soul that he loves so much that he died for that person. And so I know you're inviting people by sharing your story into saying, like, okay, like, what kind of God is that? All right, where I don't have to earn this. And he would want to be in relationship with me to the point where I can experience that. And as a result, everything else in this life just really starts to pale by comparison. Like, who doesn't want that? And yet we all hold back. Like, so, like, Jeff, why do you think we hold back? Because we do. If we're being honest, even when we're there, we have moments like Spenser. There's probably the moments where you're like going to, Chantel, to your wife, and like, why am I struggling with this right now? Like, he's only ever proven himself to be faithful and true. And yet I'm like, my flesh is there. So, like, why do we hold back?
Yeah, it's kind of what society tells us too, right? Like, we've been groomed by, I've said before, like, the evil one will rock us to sleep like a baby,
Yeah.
to sleep, right? So I think we've been groomed, and we've so many other influences that impede, our judgment, and and I think it's a lot of distraction. In my opinion, it's a lot of distraction is why we don't we're so distracted by so many other gods in our life, that we don't give the true God, a chance. Like, I think about even just like seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all else will be added unto you. Like, when I wake up in the morning, do I seek him first? Or do I seek my phone? Do I seek my coffee? Do I seek the many other things? Do I seek my kids? Like what do you seek first? I
Which
think
is funny because we want peace. We don't want anxiety. And that's what he's promising us if we just seek him. And what do? We scroll through Instagram and look at stupid videos of dogs jumping up and down with a tutu and send it to our best friend and say, look at this. Isn't this funny? Like Spenser, let me hand it back to you. Like, what is it that causes the heart of men to hold back from a father that so desperately wants to be our father and groom us?
Yeah. And honestly, I think it's a challenge with guys, because I think the real reason for that are reasons that we don't want to admit.
And lay it on us, bro, because this is where we got to go.
Yeah. And when you don't want to admit, you can't make any steps forward. So I think a lot of it's fear of rejection.
Yeah.
It's fear of failure.
Yeah.
It's, fear of a lot of things. I would say fear of change.
Yeah.
That's a major one. Fear
pride.
of the unknown, like
pride.
Absolutely. And in pride, I think it's a matter of being afraid of the actual insecurity inside of you being exposed for others to see. And I can resonate with that.
What about wounds? So we got a lot of guys that are injured. They've had injuries. What if I can't trust God? I know for me, after my dad died, the struggle was that wound of, okay, but can I actually trust that he's going to be a father to me? Like, will he actually deliver? Like, my wife is looking to me, for leadership, or we're up against it financially right now, and I don't have a solution. Like, I got to trust God, but what if he doesn't show up? Like, wounds often lead to us not trusting. We interviewed Joshua Broom, Jeff. Remember, he said the input that we experienced in our younger years drives the output of how we see and perceive God. What else? We got fear on multiple levels, pride, wounds. What other things are keeping guys here? I'm sure they're hollering at us right now going, oh my gosh, you guys.
Keeps us, yeah.
I think, to be honest, rebelliousness, like there's a rebel heart in every one of us that just wants to go our own way. Right? Yeah. That's that carnal nature.
And certainly just a misunderstanding of what it's all about. Like the things that we just talked about of what it means to experience a life in God, but a life that's actually, in a place of self-control, of, getting these things under wraps in life. It's like, it's scary to think of living a different way because we don't think it'll be as fulfilling.
Yeah.
What is just, you're comfortable with this. It's kind of enough, right? It's sort of, it is what it is. You're used to it. And so changing that into something else, it's the territory of the unknown, where you just, you think you're going to be missing out.
So another threat is comfort.
Yeah.
Right. And boy, are we ever comfortable in North America, which is, in and of itself a problem.
There's a huge fear of missing out. I think you're so right. Like, I think there's a lot of times, think about what looks fun to so many, right? Like, I look at guys, even my son's age, they look at, all the things that they're involved in, and it's like, well, that means I can't watch, those crazy, YouTube videos, or like Instagram videos, or TikTok videos.
So the FOMO of missing out.
Yeah, like what's wrong with that? It just makes me laugh. But if you think about it, it just like slowly whittles away at your morality, right? Like, it just so slowly, you become desensitized to it all. And, soon enough, it's like, and I've heard it come out of teenagers' mouths, like, It's like, how did you just say that? Like you're pretty far down the line if you could even comment in a certain way about a certain thing. I'm just like, that's a process that you went down a road that allowed you to think in a certain way. And I think yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
that's definitely
Yeah, it's in
something.
the heart before it ever comes out of the mouth, right? When
Oh,
we hear
yeah.
it from the mouth, it's already been festering. So we've got to bring this in for a landing. Spenser, what's a nugget of wisdom that you can leave us? Like, obviously the guys that we're hoping would be listening to this are guys that, they're not there. These aren't church guys. These aren't guys that know the churchanese, as you said earlier. What's our challenge? What's our call to action?
Yeah. Well, I'll say this because it's kind of what I see on a day-to-day basis, and what I have a real heart for in my job
Mm-hmm.
is the next generation is a generation that we could potentially lose
Yeah.
if our men don't get it together and we don't understand the necessity of what it means to be
Come on.
strong
Yeah.
men living in a place of responsibility and humility and all of these characteristics. And so I'll say these on these two sides. One, if you are in a place where you're there, or at least you're doing well in that area, invest into young guys. Like young people, and we've sort of touched on this already. Young guys are craving mentorship. They
Yeah.
desire somebody to come alongside of them and to pour into their life.
Yeah.
And if you would say that you're not in a place where you can be that to somebody, just allow like the necessity of it to drive you towards making the changes. So whether that's just your kids or not, or just again a whole generation that needs men to stand up and to live by example and to invest in the ones, because I mean I've seen it. The generations just seem to be falling further and further away, and and we need to be the ones to stand up and make that change.
Yeah. Thank you, Spenser. Jeff, last word.
Man, I just want to thank you for your vulnerability,
Yeah.
your heart, your willingness to share your story, because it's through our stories, through our narratives, that's how things change. Like even just hearing your story today and being able to look at some of the parallels of my own life made me feel like, man, this is you know you were here just for me today, just to be able to
Mm.
to reflect and to understand myself a little bit more through your story. So I think and I think that's really valuable, and I think a lot of a lot of our listeners out there will take that from you, even just being able to see themselves in your story, and almost it leads them, knowing where you started and where it ended, it leads them in the right direction, and hopefully they're going to end or end that one part of their story and have another beginning, just like you have. And I just want to, I think it's so inspiring to hear about that journey that you went on, and man, refined in the fire, here you are, man, just like leading
Yeah.
others in the same way that you were led. So thank you, brother. I really appreciate you for that, man.
Yeah. Thank you,
Thanks, Jeff.
Spenser. You're not defined by your past, guys. You gotta live with the consequences of it. It's part of what Spenser was talking about, responsibility. But there's a whole bright future, and you can grab a hold of that at any point. I was 34 and divorced, and was like, okay, there's got to be a better way. And like Spenser, I just cried out, and it was a genuine desire to say, I just surrender. I want you to take hold of my life. And it was not easy. Like you know, I was in the world. I knew the world, and but it was hard to come out of that. It was hard to step away from it. But the encouragement that we have for you guys is it is a way, way, way better road. It is a narrow road, and it takes courage. It literally takes men, and it's not for the faint of heart. But there's other men like the three of us who want to see you take this road. So we're here for you. We're going to wrap up. That's Fathers for Fathers today. This is probably one of our longest podcasts or chats, but I hope that people have listened to it to the very end, because it was also really formative and powerful. Thank you, Spenser.
Thank you, brother.
My pleasure.
Holding me, I'm sinking, Father, this world is just too much on my